Welcome everybody to the Leaders Who Care series. Great to see you all. Thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon, which I know is really tough, but I really appreciate it. And the best way to start, not different than most, I guess, panels is to, and as I said, the key word here is briefly introduce yourself. Where you're from originally, where you are now, family, do you have kids, what's your favorite color, whatever you want to do, and then we'll get into the really nitty gritty. So alphabetical order by last name. Payal, you want to share first?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mark, for getting us all together. I'm Payal Farsad, and I'm in Fair Oaks, California, which is a little bit very close to downtown Sacramento. And we moved here from the Bay Area and originally from India. So it's my husband and our kids and our farm here in Sacramento.
Super. Any pets?
Yes, 23, believe it or not.
Nice. And what are they? Not by name.
Yeah, so we've got dogs, 3 dogs. We've got a fish. We've got chickens, guinea pigs, cats, lots of adopted turkeys, and all sorts of crazy farm animals that call our home their home too.
Super sweet. Do the turkeys run away on Thanksgiving? Oh no. Okay, well, she's getting back. Elizabeth, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Funk. I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas City and came out to California when I came to Stanford for undergraduate, and then spent a lot of time in technology, was at Harvard Business School, and then have been living in the Bay Area since then. And I have 2 teenage children, single mother, and thrilled to be here.
Super. Have you ever heard that joke that Jay Leno says about teenagers that around 13, 14, they get abducted by aliens? I got 3 boys. They get abducted by aliens, and then they bring them back around 19, 20, and you realize, oh, now I recognize you, type of thing. So good luck with that. Shamil.
Hey, Mark, and it's great to be here with this awesome group of panelists. We've done one of these together before when Elaine hosted us for the Nonprofit Summit with Harvard Business School. My name is Shamil Hargovan. I was born in Australia, and my family's been a nice set of circumstance of history, I suppose. So they were, my late father and my mother were actually born in Africa, in South Africa and Tanzania. And they were a product, I guess, of immigration from India to Africa many generations ago. And as it goes, my father got arrested for dancing with a Caucasian, a friend of my mom's visiting from Europe while they were in South Africa. And they decided it was time to go to Australia and start their lives there instead. And so it was no record or anything, but it was a wake-up call that it's time for a more free society. And that's how I was born in Australia. Fast forward years later, I found myself at the age of 16 moving to Silicon Valley and trying to figure out what life's going to hold from there. And for me, coming from growing up in East Africa to then coming to California and the big bad world of Silicon Valley, my eyes just shot wide open. It was incredible, not only the opportunity in just pure economics and scale, but the mindset. The mindset in California was anything's possible, and people invested in you and believed in you. And I feel very fortunate to have landed there. And I feel, not everyone does get such an opportunity to land in a place where it does nurture people. So I've always set the goal to try and do some of that when I made it myself. And, certainly, we all aspire to the things we want to do with our lives. For me, a big part of it has been focusing on helping founders and owners on the business side, in particular on their strategic exit, but then also creating new philanthropic capital through that process. And I also currently run a foundation called UltraVest Charitable Services, bringing board governance to local charities.
And you have a special moment coming very soon.
I do. I'm going to be a dad here shortly. And I'm sure that's gonna rock my world, as they say.
It certainly will. Do you know if it's a boy or girl yet?
I do, but if I give that secret on national television over here, I could get in big trouble.
We don't want to get you in trouble. Just let us know. Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Mark, for having me here. My name is Elaine MacDonald. I currently run a nonprofit enterprise called Knowledge Impact Network. I originally came from New York. I was born in Queens, child of Chinese immigrants. Spent some time growing up there, going to Boston for school, working overseas in Asia Pacific, and then found myself in California just because I love the culture of innovation and possibilities out here on the West Coast. So I currently still live in California in Menlo Park, Northern California, not too far from Pyle. And I now have 3 children, 3 teens, and a dog. And the analogy I use, 3 daughters, is that the kids, they start off as dogs, loving and affectionate. They're now, as teens, are acting like cats. You just need to feed them, shelter them, give them food and water, and then let them do their own business, and then they'll climb back in their beds. And I'm hoping for them to turn back into dogs.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. There used to be a dog thing, something on TV, I think, at one point too. So that's a good one. I'm going to steal that, if I may. Some way to go. Well, it's obviously, you've each had your own amazing journeys, totally diverse of background, experiences, perspectives, etc. But you have aligned values, which is how we started Fifth Element. We all had different backgrounds, but we went with aligned values. So before we go into it further, can you each share, when you discovered your why and in fact, why you do what you do? So maybe we'll go with Pyle again.
Hey, I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties with my internet, so I'll try to stick along, and if it happens again, then I'll let you guys continue on without me, but I'm there in spirit. But let's hope it works, all fingers crossed. So I'll share with you guys something that you might not find about me online, or if we're close, then you would know, and otherwise you probably wouldn't know. But it's been last 5 years that I've really been chasing purpose. I'm just determined to seek why I'm here in this lifetime and what all I was meant to do and offer beyond getting stuff done, beyond the ladder, profits, achievements, things of that nature, enjoying my life, enjoying my family and my loved ones. What gap was I sent here to fill that serves a complete stranger? And so, I've always thought of people that are far away, that are different from me, people that I don't know, animals, the nature, the soil, the trees. Those things are really important to me. And I just didn't know how to put it all together as my lifestyle, as my day-to-day work. So what I found is that when I can collaborate with somebody and together we can amplify their genius, their goodness, then maybe we can make something more than making a difference. We can actually scale that impact. So it's at 37 that I found that I was a chief investment officer, and my goal for a very long time working in financial services was to be a CIO at 40. So here I was really excited. On one hand, I beat my own goal, my own made up target to be somebody someday. But on the other hand, what most people don't know is that I beat up my body to achieve that goal. And I lost my health to achieve whatever success and wealth I was able to have because of my corporate life. And so there was this awakening, if you will, of seeking balance, seeking harmony, figuring out what that was and meant. And so life forced me to actually embrace doing some inner work and outer work and reconcile my personal life with my work life. And so that's my when and my why. And the quote that I love, that's been my inspiration, is burn whatever doesn't serve your higher good, and may all the bridges you burn light your path to the greater good. So.
That's a tough act to follow. I tell you. By the way, reminding me to introduce you to our new partner, Andrea Venner, who runs our whole well-being practice. And you guys will, well, all you guys will love her, but yeah, she's fantastic. So Elizabeth, when did you?
Well, when I left Yahoo, I was starting to think about what I wanted to do next professionally. And I realized that it had some financial success and I wanted to also be giving back, whatever that meant, and assumed that meant philanthropically. And I fell very in love with microfinance, the idea of small loans to the world's poor so they could become entrepreneurs and build their own way out of poverty, particularly coming from Silicon Valley. And as I started to look at the industry, I realized that the vast majority of those organizations were nonprofits. And I started asking the question, why wouldn't you bring for-profit capital? You could help so many more people. And because of that scale, you could charge lower interest rates and actually do better and do it in a better way. And Muhammad Yunus was furious at me. And he said, it's unethical to make money while doing good. And it was an aha moment for me because I thought, you know what? I know I'm right here. They're missing something. And I think what I now look back on my life and I see that pattern, which is that if I had just decided I wanted to work on poverty alleviation, it's just such a daunting thing. I don't think I could have been inspired. But what catches me personally is where I see one place where I can prove something, where I can create an example, and then hopefully it takes off on its own. And the thing that takes off on its own is what solves poverty, not me. And so that kind of fierce optimism of trying to prove points, and it's been a pattern for me. And it gets me so jazzed up because there's one little thing that actually I can really do, rather than trying to bite off saying I'm going to, solve global warming, right? That I can prove a concept. And so that was kind of what triggered my why and my moment. And I started an impact fund that invested in microfinance organizations. And since then, have still been always about trying to find the missing hole people aren't seeing. And that gets me really energized, which I'm now doing around homelessness as well. And really inspires me, not necessarily the topic of poverty or environment or whatever, but when I see one place that I can demonstrate.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I'm inspired already. That's pretty brilliant. Let's go with Shamil.
I just want to piggyback up Elizabeth and saying, she briefly mentioned work on homelessness. The organization Elizabeth's leading, Dignity Moves, is making big moves as far as I'm concerned, and it's been inspirational to watch, and getting a paradigm shift in what seemed a place where government and the public and politics were just clouding any progress at all. Elizabeth just said, we're going to do something, and it started to do it. So yeah, very inspiring work.
And on top of that, there's always a guy that runs ahead of the questions and the stuff we're going to talk about too, No, that's cool. Ditto. So what about you now?
I'd like to say my why is a bit of a work in progress. I've got some theories about it. I can point to the time where I committed to service in my life. I was 19 years old in a college dorm room, probably inebriated in some form. I was at Claremont McKenna College out in California, and I was around what I would call really good friends. And the conversation turned to, okay, if we can hold each other accountable for something in our lifetime, what are the 3 things that we can hold each other accountable for? And for me, interestingly enough, since I was 19, it hasn't changed. My 3 were fall in love, experience the riches of love. My number 2 was to do something worthy. And I really emphasized the do something worthy part of a Nobel Peace Prize. It wasn't so much to get it, but it was you, my friends, tell me if I've done something with my life worthy. 3 was to live and die knowing you've had true friendship. And I'm confident I can say that for sure. And I always had a 3.5, which was the cheeky one I threw in at the end, because I was a subject of getting government support when my mom was a single mom, and my brother and I and her couldn't quite make ends meet. I never liked that feeling of needing that kind of support. And so I always said, I got to make enough money to not care about money so I can focus on number 2. And I'm now on a path where, like anybody, you realize as you get older, what seemed like enough money then is different today. And when you want to make the kind of impact, it doesn't hurt to leverage true private sector resources to drive change. So from my perspective, that's still part of the goal. But fundamentally, that pursuit of do something worthy you got to pick your strengths. What is it that you know well, and where you think you can make a contribution? I think, Pyle, you put it very, very eloquently in finding that very specific that piece where you can make that contribution. And for me, on the specifically the do something, it comes down to, I've always been interested in foreign affairs. It's amazing to me how our world has so much international conflict. We are even in today's world, you know, a country can attack another country unilaterally and cause an economic crisis, or just put democracy in peril. I'm not going to get into all the politics of that. I'm sure there's different parts of that story, but fundamentally, I got really caught up in the cloud of you can solve the world's problems by getting everyone to sit around the table and get along. But here's the reality. You can't do any of that unless there's strong communities. You got to build it at the ground level. And so I've been trying to figure out how to bridge, you know, call it international order and peace, but then marry it with economic empowerment at the local level and figure out how do you drive those two together. And that's where my journey ends. I'm still trying to figure out the rest, and I'm an open book.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll have another panel, but we'll definitely talk about that. Super cool. Elaine.
Yeah, well, so unlike Shamil, I'm embarrassed to admit, when I was 19, I was not thinking about what good can I leave for the world. I think probably like maybe some of the stories that Pyle and Elizabeth shared, you know, I started off in more of this traditional, you know, kind of background, right? I started my career in business. I worked as a management consultant for a global strategy firm, and did work in Asia Pac and the US. And I learned that I really loved, I loved that work of consulting. I loved solving problems. And my favorite experiences were those working in developing markets where you could really see huge potential, and you could see that the impact would be very tangible. But then after doing that for a number of years, I realized, God, to really affect change, you know, in solving these problems, you really have to understand how to make that change happen from the inside, from sort of the operating experience, working within a company as opposed to from the outside lens. So then I switched gears and you know, worked for a large consumer packaged goods company doing brand management to really get operating experience. And that was just really critical for me to see and understand, like, you got to get both strategy and execution right. You can't just, you know, it's not just about making the right decisions. It's about figuring out how to make change happen, and change is a process. You need to know what to move towards, but the real challenge, and we can get into this theme later, is how do you get this ship to move in the same direction with different incentives? It's really, really tricky business. And so I really appreciated that, having experience working within a large organization, as well as being in the CPG space, having that market lens first. So it's not about just developing a great product, but at the end of the day, who are your end users, your end consumers? Are you really solving a market need, or just saying, here, look at this shiny new gadget, which I see a lot living here in Silicon Valley. As far as the pivot, the reason how that's all connected is that, like many others, I then moved to this stage in life where I had children. I had 3 kids, as I alluded to. And that really was a pivotal point for me to look at the world differently, to look at what kind of future their lives would look like and what role I wanted to play in affecting that future. And so I started doing more volunteer work. I started doing pro bono consulting work with nonprofits, and started thinking about my own career and kind of analyzed myself in those like traditional frameworks of what are my core competencies, what am I really good at? You know, how can I take what I know how to do and make more out of it? And so I leveraged one of my core assets, my Harvard networks, and started doing pro bono consulting work through this program called Harvard Business School Community Partners. And it's a program that enables alumni to use their business skills for social good. And that's where it kind of clicked and came together for me. I just loved this idea of bridging talent, finding people with skills, capacities, knowledge, insights, and applying it to solve very different types of problems and challenges. And so I loved it so much that I took over running that program for several years to kind of inspire alumni from different ages and diverse professional experiences to to really pursue and use their talent for impact. And so after doing that, I realized I love being the bridge, the person who connected the dots, connecting, the leaders with the social ventures. And I realized that there was really large demand on both sides, right? There was no shortage of social ventures seeking outside expert support, nor leaders who really wanted to do something good in the world, but they just didn't know how to access those opportunities. And so after doing that for a number of years, I realized that there's an opportunity to create a bigger bridge. So I love being that bridge, but there's really a bigger bridge there, right? Because of the huge demand. So why just work with local nonprofits, which is what I was doing, but how about global ventures tackling really, significant, massive challenges on a global level? And then why do you have to graduate from a particular school, right? There's plenty of leaders out there who have a wealth of knowledge. And so, coming together, what I do today is that at Knowledge Impact Network is really bringing those two pieces together at a more global and massive scale.
You know what's great about you guys? This is another Jay Leno thing. He used to say when he had Robin Williams on his show, he said, all I got to do is say, hey, Robin, and it's all over. He just does the whole thing. And you guys are great that way. This is so easy for me to do. So, it's interesting. You're all in a lot of ways saying the same thing. And I found that there's a reason we trademarked the term leaders who care. Because I found a long time ago when I couldn't understand why it's taken decades for corporates, family offices, you name it, to realize, number one, there's all types of capital that can be used, not just philanthropic. And number two, that it actually is good for business. And it especially is good to attract talent, especially now, because especially young people want to make money and have a purpose at the same time. They don't want to give up one for the other anymore. And my perfect example was when I came down to the States to be executive director of a global leadership development nonprofit, I had to take a pay cut to do that. But I wanted to do it so bad. I shouldn't have had to take a pay cut to do that, or go to a company just to make money and that's it. So we create OmniWins, we call them at Fifth Element, to bring all these groups together. Why do you think it took so long? I mean, we're supposed to be smart. Why do you think it took so long for us to get that? Still has a way to go. And do you believe, I think the answer to this, that business can do better in what they're doing by doing good? And I'll go with Shamil first.
In terms of what took us so long, I think the long and short of it is we've experienced a time in history where, this may get a little controversial, but I would say we've experienced a time in history where we've had incredible wealth developed in a century. If you think about the American century that has last occurred, incredible amount of wealth. Incredible social moves on one hand, you look at progress and go, it's not fast enough. On another hand, you can say the world is better off in so many vectors from 100 years ago. And somewhere along the line, I think people started to think it was going to be governments that would play a much bigger role in social good. And what's happening is fundamentally, I think governments are recognizing they can't do it alone. They don't have the economic capability to keep doing it. Governments are generally inefficient at figuring out how to creatively do it on their own. And so you're going to have to find other folks to step in and fill the void. And I think it's going to be even more true because, if you look at the millennial generation, 2008 financial crisis, COVID crisis, potentially another, call it stagflation, inflation, recession, pick your economist theory here and insert it. And the reality is governments are just going to get taxed. You can only do so much stimulus. And I think in some ways what's occurred is a moment where the only way you still got the same people trying to be involved in leading the world. The only way you're actually going to start to drive the real change is you're going to have to share the burden of driving change.
So let me interrupt for a second. So I'm going to pile for a minute. With all that, do you think it's changed in terms of behaviors and action with more women being engaged, the younger generation being engaged?
Yeah, there's a growing body of work, and I'm stating Harvard polls and Deloitte studies and research from the Pew Research Center. I mean, all of it's showing us like a couple of things, a couple of cultural shifts that are happening. And that's the Zoomers, Gen Z, you know, our youth is rising. I mean, period. What does that mean? That means that they're actually they're learning from us and past generations, and they're deciding that, you know, maybe they want a different life for themselves. They want a different kind of atmosphere, a different kind of environment, social contracts. They want an awakening. They want to have it a little bit different. Same thing with women, people of color, and honestly, as well as with people that are really privileged, old money, you know, giant institutions. They're all kind of trying to get the courage to be part of something greater than themselves. And I think that is what's going to make good business do more good. We all have to get in the business of the greater good. And I think that's happening. I think the greater good is becoming everyone's business. Slowly, but surely it's headed that way. So I actually feel reassured by that.
So Elizabeth, there's more urgency from the younger generation to get it going, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the other things that has triggered this or accelerated it is, well, specifically the awareness about global warming. And I think that has opened a lot of eyes, particularly the younger generation, because it's them and their kids that are going to be living in the world they inherit. And so they're starting to think that there is more urgency and putting more pressure. But, you know, another thing that's accelerated this movement is social media and the internet, where there's now a lot more transparency about what companies are doing. And there's a lot more way for you to voice your opposition, which is getting companies to pay more attention and spread the word that this is a reputable company and this is one that's doing damage. And so certainly I do believe that the younger generation is driving a lot of this change. But then the other thing that is accelerating it is companies that are maybe making changes and being more socially responsible because their customers, the millennials, are demanding it, or government is demanding it, or because regulators are demanding it. So they're doing it because they have to. And then we're finding that those companies are outperforming the ones that don't. So now all of a sudden you've got a real tailwind, which is these companies that might not have done it for the right reasons, all of a sudden are outperforming. And thousands of studies show that companies are outperforming if they are considering ESG factors. And so then you get companies doing it for that reason as well. And so it's just been a virtuous cycle to accelerate.
It's interesting, Elaine. I have a client, Ryder System, used to be Ryder Trucks. Just how old I am, I guess, to remember that and stuff like that. And long story short, when I was doing a lot of work for them, they had a lot of young families there, and they eventually built a daycare center in their headquarters so their families can be more comfortable and less stressed about, I got to leave, I can't leave, I have lunch with my kid and things like that. It was the best ROI they ever did for that type of thing. And I also find, you can relate to this, why it took so long and why it's so important is the young people especially, you know, they want to be involved in the community, they don't have time. However, if they could be a knowledge partner and get engaged on that, and then the value they're bringing back to their company for that engagement, I mean, it's an omni-win, not to be cute, but it's an omni-win all over, right?
Absolutely. And I love seeing how companies are recognizing that employee engagement and finding ways for their employees to, whether it's share their knowledge or to go out there and, you know, do a clean the beach day or build a house together, that really adds to not only employee satisfaction, but it really helps people progress in their own careers, to be mentors, to be helping others, that they learn. As everybody knows, there's no better way to learn than to teach. And so the more people are out there sharing their knowledge, the more it truly, I do believe it is an omni-win for the companies and for the individuals and for the communities that they support.
You know, I think I got my first community thing when I was in, I think, senior in high school or something, and the Montreal Canadiens hockey team, I'm a huge hockey fan. The Montreal Canadiens hockey team was going to be at a McDonald's, where even then I didn't eat at, but they were going to be there. So I volunteered. The only thing I didn't recognize was they put us in the kitchen. They kept the Montreal Canadiens out meeting the customers. So I didn't think that was very community oriented, but it worked to get me there anyways.
Speaking of Canada, if I can quickly just mention an example of where we see this engagement element. With Ultravest, you know, we work with corporations to bring their up and coming leaders and get them on the boards of local charities. And I recently was speaking to one of the big four telecom companies in Canada. And it was funny, I was trying to figure out how do I pitch this to them. And getting this idea of, we can improve communities and strengthen communities was certainly front and center, but it really piqued their ears and interest when I said, oh, and we can really give your leaders an intangible way to be recognized for what your ability to see them as up and coming talent by having them the opportunity to join these boards. And they go, no, that's more our language, because it was that recognition that, you can only do so much giving a raise. I mean, the great resignation is spoken. You can throw money at people, but you got to give them more than just money, or this idea of job security for people to feel like it's worth putting in half, or in some cases 2/3 of their daily hours at work. So it was just recognizing how employee engagement is tied to purpose. And I think, Elaine, you're very much onto something there with that statement.
Well, and the Gen Zers, even, there's pockets of people in every generation that I think lately they've started to express that purpose is important to them. So they're following, their attention is going to institutions and organizations that reflect their values. And so it's no longer almost enough for CEOs and leaders to just do corporate activism, check this CSR box and call it a day. I mean, they are actually now taking it a step forward and saying, hey, we'll do corporate activism, but then we also want our employees to be activists, and we're going to help and support and foster employee activism and do it like a team effort, team building and bonding. And oh, by the way, then the next step of that, the next version is we do it all within our own company, right? Within our own leaders. How about we extend and reach across the aisle and work with other companies, work with other impact organizations to collaborate with them. So everyone's trying to collaborate. Not everyone, a lot of people are trying to collaborate for progress. And I think that's really cool, because normally you compete for impact. And now people are like, you know what, let's have an abundance mindset. Let's be mindful that there's plenty and more than enough for everybody. And we're doing great. Let's collaborate and see if we can do something more for others. So there's this lovely attention shifting where people are really thinking about values and who's reflecting their values and who's doing it in a deep, authentic way.
When COVID hit, well, first of all, I was talking to somebody recently. When COVID hit, I got a lot of birds that sing outside here in the morning. I swear they were singing opera when we were all in lockdown, and basically saying, I don't know where they all went, but this is awesome, and type of thing. But I think maybe that's one of the lessons, hopefully many, that we got from COVID. Otherwise, it's even more tragic than it was, about what really is important. And I'd love for you guys to share some real life stories. Like Shamila, you mentioned Elizabeth's Dignity Moves. For example, we're bringing companies together. We're working with Morgan Freeman and his production company and so on Street Kids. The Street Kids have been gathered from around the world to form football teams, soccer. And now this is the first time they're going to be able to compete, 26 teams of boys and girls in Qatar. And then the World Cup's going to come to North America after. And so we're working with family offices and companies to be involved in that, which goes from global to local and involves education and homelessness. And it's amazing. And just by being involved in something like that is not necessarily selling anything from your business, but it's going to give your business so much value and so much impact. It's incredible. So can you share, since we highlighted it, can you share about Elizabeth Dignity Moves? And that gives you guys some time to think about what you're going to say too.
So Dignity Moves, I started it about a year ago. It was actually a group of members from Young Presidents Organization, YPO, who came together and just really formed a task force saying, like, let's learn about this, because we're going to start with the assumption that whatever we're doing is not working. We keep spending more and more money and the problem keeps getting worse. And so sometimes being a business-minded thinker can come in and take a fresh look at problems that quite frankly, governments have been sort of responsible for, but maybe not thinking innovatively. And the general response in governments is whatever we're doing, we got to do more and more of it, harder, more money. It's like, well, or we might take a step back and think about whether we're doing the right thing. And so that's really kind of the core of what Dignity Moves is about. And without going into too much of the detail, but what we figured out is that we need to be building what we call interim housing, transitional housing for people, rather than just focusing on building permanent housing for everyone. And we figured out a way to do that in a really inexpensive way and set them up on vacant parking lots and so forth. But the thing that's been interesting about Dignity Moves is that truly, the words public-private partnership get kicked around a lot. But this is, and it is in a really interesting way, which is that I've kind of come to now learn that I feel like philanthropy and private sector and governments all have very different roles. And the governments, if I went to a government and said, I think you should change your thinking about homelessness and you should start investing money in this sector instead, eyes glaze over. They don't have the flexibility to be that nimble, and they do not have something called an innovation budget. And they also don't have a team generally that are the innovative thinkers, right? Business unit. And so it's a place where philanthropy can come in. And we did our first couple of projects completely philanthropically, like I said before, to prove a point, demonstration effect, with the hope, and now we're seeing it, that governments will pick up that model and replicate it. And so it's the business thinking and coming from corporate America, and particularly Silicon Valley startup thinking, that can generate the innovation. The philanthropy says, we'll fund it, government, just get out of our way. And then governments are what take those innovations that have been privately funded and do them at scale. And so it's been a really interesting exercise in that public-private partnership. And as you mentioned, Shamil, it's we started a year ago. We're already at $40 million. We've got 20 cities in our pipeline. We can't turn these out fast enough. And so it's really been kind of there's obviously been a real hunger for an innovative answer. And I think that there's been the people have given up on the problem. I think people just scratched their head and said, this is just the way it is. Well, you know what? We have decoded the human genome and we've sent people to the moon. We can't get roofs over our neighbors' heads. I'm sorry, I'm going to cry foul on that one. It just needs some fresh thinking. So that's what we're doing.
No, it's like, duh. I mean, really, come on, you can you can do it. And that, again, not to overdo it, but that is kind of why we did the whole Leaders Who Care deal, because it really is up to leaders to bring those innovative ideas to the table and make it happen. And there's so much capital available, even beyond philanthropic, that will get a great return on investment, better than their advertising with their marketing dollars and all sorts of other stuff. So this would be like a debate, a political debate. She mentioned your name, Shamil, so you can go next.
Thank you. The example I want to point out of true public partnership with the nonprofit world is something I was involved in at a younger age at a very micro level, but just seeing it expand out. It was the fight against polio. So if you can think about the story around, we're going to eradicate polio in our lifetime, and Bill Gates puts in a bunch of money, Rotary International gets behind it, local children are raising money for it in their high schools, education campaign around the world to make it happen. But sometimes it comes down to having one central, very simple idea and say, we're going to go do it with the might of everyone behind it. And I think at some point when you have a movement like that, it takes a life of its own, but it requires a lot of coordination. I just find that such an inspiring model. If you could pick something like homelessness and say, we are going to solve it. I was going to say something else here, but we're going to solve it. And I'll bleep myself out. And so I just come to that example. I'm going to just share a little warning though, and as I think about all the progress we've made in terms of getting people activated and excited, in the same breath, because of this social media world we're living in, people move on to the next thing so quickly. So my biggest fear is, does the human consciousness have the ability to focus on something for 40 years? Because that's sometimes what it takes to make an actual change in something that big, something so systemic like criminal injustice, something so systemic like, I think one of our biggest problems of our time is going to be, and this is a function, homelessness is a function of this too, is the inequality gap. We can't exactly say, let's just have a government centralized and give everyone handouts necessarily, because there's a lot of reasons that it doesn't work every time. But we've got a huge inequality problem, and it's exacerbated by $30 trillion of wealth, moving from boomers to other generations. And you're going to have people who had to work for it and people who got it. And I think you're going to end up with a pretty unique crisis of sorts socially. But I don't want to be dire here, but I wanted to get that.
I said it was political debate. I didn't mean you should do that. No, but it's right on. And I think things like, like what Elizabeth is doing and workforce development is doing and whatnot will help bridge that gap. But Payal.
So I'll share my latest project with you that I'm very fond of. So a dear friend of mine, Alice, she's an inventor. I'm an impact investor. I'm usually not the smartest person in the room. And so my job is to find geniuses like her. She teaches design and material technology at Columbia. She was featured in Hillary Clinton's The Book of Gutsy Women and won the US Patents for Humanity Award. Anyways, she's invented this solar lamp, this beautiful, modern, slick, durable light source. And, it gives 10 hours of light on one charge. And we put it in our backyard, it looks beautiful ambiance in our landscaping. We take it on our nightly family walks, we take it camping. But here's the thing, I was thinking to myself, how do we combine the power of light, the science of solar energy, the fundamentals of just entrepreneurship, basics of coaching, just a little bit of access to capital, nothing crazy, all the things that we have plenty as a collective, and how do we offer an actionable path to sustainable transformation for young men and young women in remote rural areas like in Africa? Because their electricity is a privilege. Access to electricity, what we take for granted, is a privilege. And in fact, in Africa right now, as we speak and gather here, there's rolling blackouts everywhere in every country, really, from what I'm finding, as well as there is an electricity crisis. So, think about inspiring these young men and women with light, but in a way that helps them create a viable new source of income. And maybe it sparks inspiration because they get to learn about solar technology. And really, if you think about it, the WHO actually educated me on this, right? When there's no access to electricity, households burn kerosene to get light. And burning kerosene produces fine particulate matter, which causes asthma. You can get burns, you can get poisonings. It's not safe, it's not healthy. And darkness, when it's dark, is also not safe for girls and women. They get attacked and assaulted, and just overall crime goes up, right? So here's this little light, this cute little solar lamp, and it can solve so many problems.
So you know what? I'm going to introduce you to a company that's called Delight. And I'm going to introduce you to a company that's doing something like that. And there's some other companies too, and we'll shed a lot of light on what you're talking about. How's that?
That's so cool.
Because you're so right. The simplest things, I had a Deloitte partner that told me when I was younger that brilliance is simple.
Yeah.
I really learned more later that what he meant. Doesn't mean the journey's not complicated, but the answer actually can be. Yeah. Very, very cool. Elaine, I have a feeling I know what example you're going to give, but go for it.
Well, I want to tie a thread here, connecting the dots, what Elizabeth had touched on.
That's what you do.
Yeah, about it's more than just to create real change. You really need more than just financial capital, which is critical, but it's really connecting the people and the knowledge capital as well. That's what really propels and moves things forward. And so the example I would give is about 6 months ago for Knowledge Impact Network, I hosted a Catalyze session, which is a 90-minute sort of facilitated workshop to help one social venture called Teacher to Work really catapult this movement of project-based mentorship to help disadvantaged youth get inspired to get jobs. So this ties into your workforce readiness comment here. I knew several individuals who will be interested in this initiative to help youth find jobs, including the Dean of Workforce Development at the City of San Francisco, and invited him to be one of our knowledge partners, our volunteers, to share his knowledge in this session. And this discussion just led to immediate ideas and to action. So John at the City College of San Francisco fell in love with the Teach to Work concept. And 6 weeks later, he signed a contract to launch this initiative, which was DC based and only existed there, to launch in San Francisco starting this September with 150 students and 4 or 5 classrooms. Then just last month, I learned that he loved the model enough that he shared the story with 7 other community colleges in California. And 4 out of the 7 are going to start implementing this program in 2013. So in just, one could argue, a 90-minute bridge, this connection between leaders and social ventures with a challenge and putting the right group of people together to connect the dots, we can affect hundreds, if not thousands of lives. It's young.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm old enough to remember the Clairol commercial that said, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that was, I think, maybe even before social media. I don't even know, but it was crazy. And yes, it only takes one man, and then the village comes from there, or one woman. Hey, a little change here. My grandparents, my mom, my aunt were from Kyiv and came to Canada a number of years ago, and they would always say with that accent, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing, type of deal. And then they'd say education, and it wasn't a slogan. They weren't into branding. They were talking from real life experience. So with everything that happened, and Mother Nature, God knows, just threw the book at us because she was so pissed off about everything that we're doing. Have you guys seen, quote unquote, an awakening in terms of values of what is most important, whether it be at work, at home, wherever? And let's go with Elizabeth.
Well, I think all I have is anecdotal, but certainly, yes. The number of friends and people I know who have relocated to more vacation home kind of locations, quality of life because they were able to, and they didn't need to be working from the office so much. And I do feel like there's been a renewed sense of emphasis on each other and on that connectivity and that the personal sort of life missions. And so I definitely have sensed that. And I also feel like, the whole chance to reset, right? So when we were all of a sudden not racing around, we were, as humans, we were not doing as much damage to the, environment and all that. And so there, it was a moment where I think a lot of people took it as a stop and pause and say, when we restart this world, how are we going to do things differently? And I think it gave us an opportunity to at least stop and think about both personal life values as well as how we want to restart our economy and how do we maybe want to restart it better and stronger and more ethically.
Yeah, well said. And even Venice, actually, to see the water blue in Venice, Italy, it was like, there was hope. We can do something. Payal, what about you?
Yeah, I think our grandmothers must have been sisters because my grandma used to always say, health is your first wealth. And again, she was not branding, she was just being grandma, but it's such a great brand. I think there's a company that uses it now and should pay royalties to my grandma 40 years ago. But yeah, health, attention to mental health has become, I think, the best thing that's happened. Look, we've seen crisis after crisis. It's a lot, right? Teaching your kids from home in the middle of meetings, and there was a lot of change. And I think we as humanity did a pretty dang good job at adjusting and coping and delivering despite all of that crisis. And of course, some things go crazy and you have to regain your calm, and in the chaos, you still have to regain your calm. And so the emphasis on mental health for yourself, for your family, for your community. That's been amazing to see how important that's become in so many households. And, health is our first wealth. When we're not well, our capacity to change the world is limited. The progress we can make waxes and wanes. We can't sustain impact and change when we're not feeling like we're healthy and so anyways,
you can't do anything if you're not healthy. And sorry, so Elaine, what about you?
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of crises recently that we can point to: the pandemic, the Ukraine invasion, wildfires in California. The silver lining to all of that is really that it has shown the awakening of the interconnectivity of us all. I think Elizabeth alluded to this, but you cannot deny how interconnected we all are in this world. And to your earlier point about why did it take so long for businesses to understand? I mean, it's just so clear. Everybody knows, you know, whether you're a business or whether you're 3 years old, that anything that you do has implications for others. And so understanding that interconnectivity is what's going to get us to bridge the aisle, break down the silos, and start working on solving problems together. The values, I think, are the core values are still the same. I mean, the recent events in this world reinforced, as Pyle said, you need your health. Education is critical to finding meaningful jobs with livable wages. And my goodness, we can't keep ignoring this climate change, right? It's affecting all of our lives. So I think our core values haven't changed, they've been reinforced, but what's added to that is this need to kind of work together and not say, oh, it's somebody else's problem, it's government's problem, or it's that business's problem. It's, no, we all gotta come in together and work together to solve these issues.
And Shamil, you had an awakening that's coming soon.
That's right. You know, I would agree with a lot of the sentiment. My personal belief is, you know, if you think of the awakening we've had here as kind of the first wave, I think a much bigger wave is still coming. And I think it's going to be propelled by a couple interesting factors. One is actually the connection between generations. In an interesting way, families are finding themselves together and talking together, and you know, you got a new generation and a more experienced generation connecting in new ways. Another reason I think there's going to be a much bigger wave is for a lot of people, they may reset on their goals, health, wellness, but for so many people, they've been just under the gun to survive. And so the moment you give people the ability to thrive and be part of the awakening at the same time, that's going to flood the world with a new way of thinking. And so for you know, if you get all maybe a little bit out there about it, but there's a lot of folks who predict it. They say you know, these times are marked by information connectivity, stronger and more rooted, strong, deep communities, the smaller communities, and potentially us finding that we are truly interconnected. And this is more of an Eastern tradition. This concept here that we're all dealing with is, I don't think we've even imagined you know, there's a great famous quote, in the short term, we tend to overestimate change. In the long term, we tend to underestimate change. I think we've just got if you were thinking of this as a surfer, you've got that first wave, you haven't even seen the big one come onto the beach yet.
Yeah, very, very cool. We have a couple of minutes left, and just want to add one thing. You know, there's a lot of studies that have shown clearly the thing that fills our hearts and souls more than anything is belonging, and I think was a big deal because we needed to belong when COVID was here. So it's a big deal. So we have a couple minutes left. I'd love to know from you. A client told me in 2021. He said, "Mark, you know about 2020? It seemed like 2020 flew by slowly." I thought that was like an incredible line. Now we're at almost the end of 2022, and it's like, it feels like 2020 was so long ago and yesterday, all at the same time. So, and you got to try to keep this brief. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for? And let's start with Elaine.
Yeah, definitely most grateful for, as you touched it, this, it is about the people, it's family and friends. And I know that sounds generic, but it was so important during the pandemic to really build those, to have those connections. And I've been very grateful to be able to rebuild some old friendships, you know, in isolation. Thank goodness for video conferencing tools like Zoom that really let us all kind of reconnect with people of all parts of the world, people I haven't talked to for years. So it gave me a chance to kind of pause, slow down, and really rekindle old friendships and relationships. So I'm hopeful that that is here to stay. So even as we are out and about now, traveling as much as we used to and working the ways we used to, that this interconnectivity with people that we know and we love stays because the technology is there and enables us to do so.
Good stuff. Pyle?
So I'm most grateful for, I'd say, to get another day. There's so much to be done and experienced and offered, and received that I'm grateful for another day for all of it, for everyone. Most hopeful for, I would say I would love to see unity consciousness and for it to go viral. Like a lot of things go viral these days. I would love for unity and for sharing and collaboration to go viral.
Remind me to introduce you to the Unity Project.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. God, this is recorded too. I got to come through now. Elizabeth.
So I think I'll echo a lot of the things that I'm grateful for the increased connectivity. And I know it sounds crazy, but like Zoom has been like, it's such a great gift that I'm so grateful for when we were all stuck at home. And when I started Dignity Moves, I literally did over 300 30-minute Zoom calls to learn about the problem and anybody who would listen. So I was also grateful that there wasn't yet Zoom fatigue and people were were stuck at home and willing to take the time to do that. But that kind of, networking and personal connection, even though it's virtual, I think it's been a really positive thing for our society and certainly for me. And in terms of hopeful, I just feel like the speed of innovation, both technologically, as has been documented, but just the whole spirit of innovation, and particularly with our younger generations coming into the workforce and coming into the societal fabric. I'm just optimistic with the flow of optimism. We're all so down about all the problems in the world, but we have got such amazing innovation and thinking and youthful energy to bring to bear. So I'm a absolute diagnosed optimist, but I am very hopeful for what's to come.
Bring it on. Don't lose it. Keep going. And now to complete the show, Dad, what's your thoughts?
I am very grateful for every example of, call it, leaders who don't seem to care. You find that there are umpteen examples of leaders like the panelists on this call and yourself, Mark, and bring the community together who really do care. And I found that through this pandemic, you challenge humanity to rise up in many ways. And we tend to focus on all the bad guys. We don't focus as much on the folks who really are doing the good stuff and the good work. I'm just going to reveal this now. I'm having a baby girl, and I hope she grows up to be as awesome as these three incredible women here. I'm very grateful for that. I would say I'm hopeful for this idea that, there's a famous poem, Man in the Arena, that more people realize you just got to start. And when most people recognize that when they've got nothing to lose. And for a lot of people in society, this got people to realize, if I don't do it now, when am I ever going to do it? And so I'm very hopeful that we've got things that have been germinated in the last 2 to 3 years, that in 5 years, 15 years, 3 years, we're going to go, wow, that was born in 2021, 2020, 22. And therefore, hey, we got a lot of great seeds been put in the ground recently.
Super cool. Well, I'm grateful for you guys being leaders who care and friends and working together and making a difference together. And I'm hopeful to get to know y'all better and make an impact like never before. So thanks for being leaders who care and on the series. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Mark. Thank you for organizing this.